Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our EDscursion live from the field. I'm Sarah Falkowski. I'm the education coordinator here at Rookery Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve in Naples, Florida. And you're about to join such an amazing team today from the field to learn about so many new things. So first, I want to give you a few housekeeping tips. In this webinar format, we can't see or hear you, but we know you have questions. So we want you to enter your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and the chat box if the Q&A box is not working for you. We will check those and answer your questions towards the end. This program is recorded today and you will receive the link later today via email. So a little bit about us. So today's team is made up of volunteers and researchers along with educators here at Rookery Bay, and you'll be meeting everyone throughout this morning's adventure. We are part of our national network that you just heard about in our wonderful video, and we are located right here on the western edge of the Everglades along the Gulf of Mexico in Southwest Florida. Within the state of Florida, our agency, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, through the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection, protects over 4 million acres. You can see on this map all of the sites around the state. Maybe some of you are joining from this area or even outside of Florida. And here at Rookery Bay, we manage 110,000 acres. That's 40% of Collier County's coastline. We're located today right here at the Environmental Learning Center. And the area of the reserve we're going to be talking about with our Motus Tower is located in this area here. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our first expert today. We have someone who's celebrating a birthday joining us. Cole, are you there? Cole Luzau is joining us from the research department, and she is our Motus expert. So happy birthday to you, Cole. And go ahead and introduce yourself and share your slides.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Cole Luzau. I am the avian specialist here at Rookery Bay. I'm going to work on switching my slides around real quick. This part hasn't gone as smooth as some other ones because I'm going to be switching back and forth between screens here in a minute.
Looks great.
So today I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the birds that migrate through Rookery Bay and some of the methods that we use to detect these birds. And if you've been following along with our Festival of Birds talks throughout this month, this has been a big topic. How do we track these birds? What are we keeping track of? And I've been alluding to this talk this whole time because it is really exciting, innovative stuff. So as Sarah said, at Rookery Bay, we manage 110,000 acres of estuaries. And a lot of that habitat is actually made up of either water or dense packed mangroves that make it really, really hard to see these birds that use the area. And we've had over 150 species of birds reported in the reserve, although that number may have gone up with the recent sighting of the American flamingo. And we have a bunch of different habitat types. So my job is to survey the birds within the reserve at any of these different locations. We do focus on 3 critical wildlife areas that are protected seasonally or year-round. And a lot of these critical wildlife areas for the protection of the birds are also not allowed to be accessed, making it even more difficult to track the birds that are on this area. So it's good for the birds, hard for us. So a couple ways that we have done this. Historically, we depended on bird banding. If you missed the last EDscursion, we focused primarily on bird banding. These bands help us pick out an individual bird and track it by resite. So anytime that somebody sees this bird and reports it, we know where the birds are moving to. Now, this helps us a lot, but if the birds are in an area that can't be viewed, that's when we start to have a more difficult time tracking the birds. So for this, we have a couple different methods that we use. And this is where the Motus wildlife tracking system comes in. So I will start off with a disclaimer that I am not an expert at Motus, but I've got a lot of experience using our Motus and I love this stuff. So hopefully I'll be able to answer all of your questions today. But the folks at the Motus Wildlife Tracking System and Birds Canada have done the major groundwork. So what Motus is a international collaborative network of researchers who are using automated radio telemetry to track individuals of hundreds of species simultaneously. So right now there are over 30,000 birds that have had these little Motus trackers attached to their back, and they're flying around, and these large radio towers are collecting the pings off of the backs of these birds and recording that. And this is a really, really cool method. It does have some other hiccups that we'll talk about here in a second. I think our field cam is out doing something very similar to our wildlife tracking system. Field cam, are you there?
Here they are.
Can you hear and see us okay?
Yep, perfect.
All right. Good morning. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Cole, for tuning in to us. We are out here in the field. My name is Morgan. I'm on the education team here at Rookery Bay. And this morning I stumbled upon one of our most loyal Rookery Bay volunteers, Adam. Hey, Adam, thanks for joining us today. Thank you all for coming to our last and final excursion. I know it's been a wild ride, but Festival of Birds is coming to an end. And we hope you're able to tune into an excursion, a lecture, or even a field trip in person. So I want you all to kind of get a feel for what we're doing today. Cole was mentioning Motus and that bird tracking system using radio telemetry. And today I came across Adam doing something similar, but it is a little bit different. So Adam's got this piece of equipment here. And Cole, can you tell us a little bit about the gear Adam's using for bird tracking this morning?
Yeah. So Adam has our handheld radio receiver, and it has a large antenna, and this antenna is very similar to the antennas that are on our wildlife towers. But what this system allows us to do is to detect exactly where the birds are.
Okay, so if that's used to determine where exactly they are in bird tracking, can you go a little bit more in depth into how it's different than Motus itself? What are the similarities? What are the differences? Adam's actually tracking a bird right now as we speak. We heard it.
Yeah. So what you see Adam doing here is swinging this antenna around. This antenna is called a yagi. So he is going back and forth, and when he detects a beep, he'll stop with the large scale swinging, and he'll start swinging more narrow, and there he did. So he'll switch the direction of this antenna, and when this is pointed like this, it shows us fine scale. So when it's horizontal, it's picking up anything in the area. When it is vertical, it's picking up a closer, more direct beeping noise. So he's got those beeps in his headphones. They don't come through very well on the computer, so we'll just let him kind of figure that out. So that's what he's doing.
Wow. Okay. So it looks like Adam is kind of searching for a really specific individual. Am I right, Cole? He's kind of throwing in on a really particular bird.
Yeah. So in order for this to work, it needs to have a bird with one of those little backpacks on it. And we talked about those backpacks in that banding excursion that we did last week. If it doesn't have a backpack on, this will not pick it up. So he's looking for anything that has a little backpack.
Gotcha. And today you're going to touch on Motus towers and the way those work out in terms of bird tracking. And those tend to be a more passive way of tracking an individual bird or a group of birds that might be migrating. This is obviously different because Adam, I stumbled upon him. He's looking for a really special bird out here. And he's kind of moving around, using his tool, manipulating it as he gets closer. Can you kind of describe the difference between that more passive versus active form of tracking?
Yeah, definitely. So this is what's really cool about the Motus tracking system. Those same backpacks that he's picking up on the handheld receiver are the same backpacks that are getting picked up on the Motus tower. But with the Motus tower, it's standing still. So it is a passive method of bird tracking. And it's going to have its antennas always pointed in the exact same direction. Nobody's moving them around. So that means that when the bird flies into its airspace, it pings off those antennas, but it doesn't tell us where that bird is. It only tells us that the bird is within the range of the antennas. And the next part we'll go to is how far the range of the antennas are. But the antennas on our Motus towers have a lot farther range than the antenna that Adam is using behind you.
Okay, that's a great comparison. I was actually curious myself just how different the two pieces of equipment were. And the last question, Cole, I have for you, and it's really relevant to kind of what we're experiencing today. I'm curious, what setting do you normally use this handheld equipment in? Right now, I came across Adam using it with some nice tree cover behind us, tracking a bird, but where else could you use this? And does weather impact the effectiveness? Because right now, we just kind of skimmed by with a rain shower. So can you kind of elaborate on those things?
Yeah, definitely. So these can be used in a lot of different habitats, and they are used in a lot of different habitats. In an ideal world, you would be using this in a wide open area with no trees. Potentially you've got a hill, then you're standing on the top and looking down. That would be a ideal world. Now we are in Florida where we don't really have hills. So one of the big habitats that we use this for is on our boats. So we can take this handheld unit out on our boats and we can track shorebirds. And one of the reasons we do that is that those shorebirds are often blocked by our big Motus towers, by the mangroves that are between the Motus towers and the beaches. If you're on the boats, if you're on the water, you have a more direct line of sight and therefore line of sound back and forth to the antenna here.
Okay, awesome. Well, Cole, if I'm not mistaken, I think Adam is going to need my assistance. We're getting a little bit closer to the bird that he was tracking. So I'm going to turn it over to you to elaborate a little bit more on Motus. But thanks for jumping in with me as I tune in with Adam in the field. And I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by. Awesome. So we're going to go back to my presentation here in a second.
And those of you wondering where the team is located, they are behind the Environmental Learning Center because rain was in the forecast. So we were trying to stay close to the building just in case. And now it turns out to be sunny, but that was not in the forecast late last night and this morning. You know how the field works.
Awesome. Sorry about this one little sec. Gotta go back through my slides. All right. So Adam was doing the very active version of this Motus wildlife tracking system. And if you can see in this top photo here, there is a large tower, and this tower is trying to get height. So the more height that the tower gets, the more birds it's going to be able to pick up while they're migrating over. And these small radio trackers, which you can see on the back of this shorebird here, they each have a unique emission signal, so a unique series of pings, and that allows the, sorry, things are frozen on my end. All right, Sarah, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I lost everything for a second. That allows the system to tell exactly which individual bird flew through. Now, this is where the towers are located. And if you look here at the United States, there's a bunch of them in the eastern United States and in Canada. Now, part of that is because this system was started in Ontario, and so the folks up at Bird Studies Canada have been kind of promoting it up and down their flyway, but it's starting to take off. It is now on 4 different continents in 7 different countries, I think. So each one of these yellow dots is a unique tower. We have a tower located near our Shell Island Road research station, and that's this little 2 loop bow tie looking one here. So that's where we'll be talking about, and that bow tie shows the area in which one of these birds is going to be detected. Now, our station only has antennas going in 2 directions. That's because there are a few others in the area that are reaching north and south, so ours is going east and west. Rookery Bay is hoping to put another one of these at our new Goodland Field station. And one of the reasons we're hoping to do that is because this year we actually were out on the beach and we saw a bird that had one of these Motus tags, and it wasn't pinging off of our tower, and it turned out that it was actually too far south. And so we're realizing that we need to have more coverage for these areas. But this Shell Island Road station has picked up some really cool sightings that I want to kind of share with you guys. So all of this information that I'm about to share is open source. So anybody who wants to go check it out can go to motus.org, and you can click on different towers all over the place and see which birds are going through what areas. And here we've had a lot of Swainson's thrushes, we've had a few common nighthawks, a couple shorebirds, and a painted bunting. And then just this fall we had 2 gray catbirds from a project that just started up recently. So maybe we'll see more gray catbirds coming through in the near future. So these are the species we've detected so far. And I'm going to focus a little bit on the common nighthawk because this one's got some really, really cool stuff that you can see on the Motus website. And it's actually, the Motus tower is changing how we're spending our time monitoring birds. So we haven't historically monitored for common nighthawks here at Rookery Bay. But in 2019, we picked up a common nighthawk that was detected and banded first in Ontario. And it flew straight south and went through Florida, and it looks like it went on to South America. Now, in 2018, it didn't ping off of our tower. That's because our tower wasn't up during the fall of 2018. So we got our tower, and in the fall of 2019, we saw that this bird came right through the reserve. Now, it may have come through the reserve the year before, but because there was no tower to detect it, we can't say whether it did or did not. But the next year, we had another common nighthawk ping off of our tower, and this one came from Montana, and it didn't cross another Motus tower between when it was banded out west and when it got to Florida. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that scientists tend to think of flyways and migration as being linear. So you would think that the birds that nested in Washington would come down through California, and the birds that nested in Ohio would come down through Florida. But that's not always the case. And the common nighthawks are one example of that. So when you go into the Motus website, you can actually check all the birds that are tagged of a species and see how they're moving. So we can actually look at how important Florida is as a state, and thus Rookery Bay is within the state of Florida, to this species of common nighthawks. I have a really, really cool graphic here. I'm going to switch my screen real quick. Okay, so this is the common nighthawk, and at the beginning of this, you're going to see a lot of birds that are coming down from Ontario. Now that's because Ontario started looking really closely at nighthawks before anybody else did. So this right here shows you where it says starts. That's the date where the first common nighthawk was banded. It ends on, December 15th because that's the day that I was putting this presentation together. So I'm going to press play. So here you see the birds just starting to get tagged. They're moving around in Ontario. Woo! And they all migrate down south, straight through Florida and on to South America. In the spring, they migrate back up. A lot of them come through Texas and Louisiana and move around, but their southward migration is coming through Florida. Then they start banding these birds in Montana, and look at that. One bird after the next in Montana is coming east and migrating through Florida on their way south. So I'm going to just play this again because it's just a couple seconds long. There's all the Ontario birds. Here's spring. Second winter. They started banding. And there they go. So you can find these kind of graphics about any of the bird species that have tags on them. Not just the common nighthawks, not just the ones that are detected here at Rookery Bay. This is allowing us to see that Florida is a major migratory pathway for these birds, and because of this, we've actually started doing surveys with the Nightjar Survey Network to see how many birds are coming through our area in the spring. And we hadn't surveyed for them before, but now we're starting to see that this is a bird species that we do need to take a greater look at. Another species that we've gotten quite a few pings off of is the Swainson's thrush. And thrushes are interesting because a lot of them are kind of hard to detect. They're around, but you don't see them because they hang out in thickets and brush. And it's also hard to say if we've got 100 thrushes or just one, because you only see one at a time usually. And here you can see that we've had many different detections, and the tag deployment section here shows us that each one of these birds was a different individual that had been detected. So the birds are moving through this area pretty readily. So this is another one that I went and I was interested in learning more about their migratory pathways. So I'm going to go back. This is our common nighthawks. And this one is going to be our Swainson's thrush. Now, for this one, I wanted to not just look at the species, but by who all is banding them. So each different color you're going to see here is a different project that is looking at these Swainson's thrushes. So this starts only just this year because there's so much data on Swainson's thrushes that I didn't want to bog it down too much. So this is just this fall. So you can see here that some birds do some weird things where they're going all the way over to California from what I think is probably somewhere in northern Canada or northern United States, southern Canada. But one of the cool things you can see here is that it doesn't seem to matter where the birds are banded, they're still all coming to the eastern United States and migrating down through. And this is why Rookery Bay and Florida is so important, is because we are a major migratory highway for all of these migrating birds of different species. And I highly recommend going to motus.org, checking this out, pick your favorite bird species, see where it's going. You can really learn a lot, and it's all open source and available for anybody to use. So with that, does anybody have any questions for me?
Wow, Cole, that was so cool. Would you mind dropping into the chat the link to that website so folks can go there on their own?
Sure.
All right, cool. So we have a new guest joining us. Who are you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Janine Windsor, and I'm also on the education staff here. And that was so exciting, sitting and watching those migration routes. I've been looking forward to this excursion for quite some time. So yeah, some of the questions that have been entered into the chat box or Q&A box are similar questions that I have, you know, as I'm listening. So we'll go ahead and start with a question more towards the beginning when you were showing the bow tie depiction of the range. What is like the mileage that like the range, how big is it? Is it 5 miles, 10 miles?
So if you check out Motus, a lot of stuff is going to be in kilometers because this was a system that was started in Canada. but a kilometer is approximately half a mile. So the range of one of these areas is going to be 13 kilometers around. So not 13 kilometers from the tower, but 13 kilometers long. So about 6 miles.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, it does do a pretty good job. And you can actually put the towers, if you're a state or an agency that is really behind Motus, they'll create fences where they'll put their Motus towers in a line so that they have no areas of gaps between the ranges.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Kind of keeping on that, since you have this amazing passive way of tracking, and with new data that's available, do you find, or has it been noted that traditional flyways are no longer important based on what maybe the Motus towers are showing?
Yeah, definitely not. They are still very important, and they're still there to some degree. It's just showing that not everything is exactly how we perceived it. And so when we would think that there's a ton of one species and they're probably migrating straight south, that's not always the case, although there are going to be species that do that.
Okay, that makes sense. A good question that we had is, and I guess maybe if you can speak to any of your previous experience, you were talking about the birds that are banded, and you kept referencing with the nighthawks. In Montana, they're banded. Is that a different process than maybe we saw on our previous EDscursion where you were banding songbirds? What does that banding process look like for maybe something like a nighthawk?
Yeah, so it's a similar process. Different birds are captured in different ways. That particular project that's doing the nighthawks in Montana actually has a really great blog, so you can read everything they're doing. But they're doing a lot where they're looking at where their birds are actually nesting. So they're targeting certain individuals instead of letting any one of them that hits a mist net come through. So they're kind of using playback, and they're getting closer to the home ranges when they do band these birds. But I think that they are still using mist nets just like what we used at our banding demo. One of the big differences, though, is that they are affixing these tags to the backs of these birds. So the little tag actually will come with a backpack, and the backpack kind of has two little loops that go up around the essentially thighs of the bird, which is actually their knees. Bird anatomy is not as straightforward as you'd think, but it goes up around their thighs and then straps to their back, so it's not in the way of their wings at all. So when they fly, they don't have to worry about the backpack dragging on them.
Wow. So if you were, birding and you happen to be looking at some nighthawks, is that backpack visible if someone was, using binoculars? Would that be something that is noticeable on the bird?
Not normally.
Okay.
If you are somebody who's maybe looking through a spotting scope at a shorebird that is not moving around, you might be able to pick up the antenna hanging off the end of a bird. And the bigger the bird, the bigger the backpack. So sometimes on something like a white pelican, you're going to look at it and you're going to go, oh my gosh, there is like something on that bird. But on a smaller bird, you probably would never see it. They don't really feel them either. They're very, very small and very lightweight.
Huh. With all these different types of tags, bands, and then the tower itself, is this process, like this type of equipment, Is it expensive? That's something we had a question about where, maybe not every people who are doing these efforts who really want to participate in this, maybe, the cost could be high versus some of those other methods like Adam was using.
Yeah, so there is a cost. It is high for an individual person, although it's not terrible for most organizations. So if you are attaching your Motus tower to an area that already has internet and electricity, the tower's maybe $4,000 for that tower. That box that Adam is using is probably about $2,000 and takes a ton of effort that is also going to cost money for manpower unless you've got somebody like Adam who's willing to volunteer doing that kind of work. But yeah, they're not exactly the cheapest thing. Probably the biggest limiting factor, though, is actually learning how to build it. So it does take some electrical know-how, and it really helps if you find somebody who is a radio operator. There's a bunch of guys who, not always guys, people who have their own hobby radios that they use, and those guys really know what they're doing.
Yeah, I bet. We're talking a lot about bird specific. It's Festival of Birds, but with the Motus Tower, do they pick up anything else that could be tagged? Are there tags, on other animals?
Yeah. And it's super cool because you can go on and see that website, just like what we were doing earlier with the Swainson's thrush. There's somebody who just had one in his pocket. So there's one that's man, and you could see him moving around Europe, actually. But they're being put on bats, dragonflies, and butterflies, actually. And it'll be interesting to see how they move. I think as this system is really getting built out, more towers are getting put up. People are really looking at it for other species as well.
That is awesome. Yeah, because some people are really interested in some of those other animals you just mentioned. When, just one of our viewers might be going onto the Motus website, is it pretty easy to use and figure out how to create those, nice playbacks like you were showing us? Is it pretty intuitive?
Yeah, there's an explore section, and when you go into explore, it'll show you a map, and you can click on any different tower anywhere, and it'll give you a list of the birds that have been picked up. And as long as you keep clicking the map button, you don't want to go a table because tables aren't as cool. If you keep clicking the map functions, it will give you all sorts of information about individual birds and species of birds and how they're migrating through. It does take a little bit of fiddling, but it's pretty user-friendly.
Perfect. Yes, I think that's what we're hoping for. And I've gone on there myself a few times, and pretty excited to keep exploring now that I know even more about it. I think we have time for just one more question. And this is someone who I believe attended our first EDscursion, where they remember that you did talk about nighthawks using the area near the boardwalk. So, would we ever know if any of those were tagged or, were they nesting here? Are they, you think, picked up on any project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is really an interesting thing as well. So the nighthawks, you could see that some of them are using Ontario, some of them are nesting out in Montana. They also nest in Florida, and they'll actually nest on our beaches and in our scrub habitats. In Florida, because we were just looking at that, you can tell that no nighthawks have been Motus tagged in Florida. So they'd have to go up farther north to have hit a scientist who's doing that. The ones that nest here probably don't go any further north. This is probably as far as they get, so they probably aren't tagged. However, if they were tagged, the boardwalk area is fully in our coverage zone for our Motus tower. So if they were tagged, we would know it.
Awesome. Well, hey, maybe one day. That'll be exciting.
Be awesome.
Wonderful. Well, Sarah, I think that's all the time we have for questions. And
Yeah. We're just about to wrap up. I wanted to share my screen one more time as I am thanking Cole and Janine and Morgan and Adam and Dita on the back end for helping us today. So here again is a map of the land that Rookery Bay manages. And we hope that you will come and visit us at the Environmental Learning Center. We are open Monday through Saturday, 9 until 4. And it is the Festival of Birds Month. I'm trying to change my slide here. There we go. We are dedicating the entire month of January to celebrate birds. So this is the 18th annual festival. And I know some of you are already part of the festival, but if you don't have your festival pass yet, you only have a few days left to get it. And it includes admission to our keynote presentation, which is tomorrow. And it is going to be really cool. It's 2 local presenters who are going to be on Zoom, so you can join us from wherever. And they are going to be talking about their life as a big ear birder, including all of the miles, airline and car miles that they travel to see so many species of birds. And they have 2 full-time jobs. The 2 of them have full-time day jobs, and they do this recreationally. So that is really something to check out. So if you go to our website, rookerybay.org/calendar, you can find out how to sign up for all of those things. I wanted to mention that we also have a closure event for the end of the Festival of Birds that includes all of the personalities that you've been seeing throughout our series of EDscursions, including a special appearance from the director of Rookery Bay, Keith Lockinen, who is the one who saw the flamingo. So if you haven't seen that on the social media pages, check out the Friends of Rookery Bay and you will see photos that Keith took of the flamingo in the reserve. Really special. So that concludes our recording today, and we hope that you'll join us for trivia on Monday, and that's at 2 o'clock. And the link that's in the chat box is where you can find the registration details for all of these things. So that's it for us today. It is 11:45 Eastern, and we are signing off. You'll receive the email for this link momentarily. Thank you for joining us and your great questions. Bye-bye.